and Labor and the chair of the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Standing Committee. So today I'm speaking to you from Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota. And if you come to Winnipeg, you may have noticed that the Golden Boy sits on top of our legislature looking north, because for the time since the settlers came and much before that, Indigenous people knew that the success for Manitoba lies in the north. It just seems that lately we may have forgotten that reality. Mineral wealth does have and continues to have the greatest potential for economic opportunities. All you have to do is look at the latest reports that Manitoba has commissioned, the Looking North report and others. And for example, I just looked up, sometimes we're compared to tourism. And in that case, the average hourly rate is $17 per hour. Some of you are in economic development, so I know that this is important. And of course, it's seasonal and part-time, while minerals, the average salary is $43 an hour. A dramatic difference just for the local individual person who has an ability to participate. The chances of finding a new deposit in Manitoba is relatively high. We have been what's known as underexplored. It's because we tend to be lumped with more sedimentary environments, geological, and we're not in Ontario where the money is, big money. So we have an opportunity to find many, many more world-class deposits. And Canada and Manitoba trains and produces the world's best geologists, engineers, people who work for the extractive industry are highly skilled. Unfortunately, if we're not competitive, those very good, highly trained people will work anywhere in the world. And so it is an extremely competitive industry. The average cost for a mine, and they vary depending on circumstance. I believe the Lawler deposit is somewhere around $500 million, which is a bargain, $500 million. Because the average cost is over $1 billion to bring a deposit into production, which means that's a huge capital outlay and should be considered when you're looking at opportunities. And for Manitoba, it's based on, because we're so competitive, you have to have a modern regime and you have to move with the times. And we were #1 in the world as a place for investment, but now we are 37th. The worst province in Canada. So please become involved. I mean, we know that wealth is in the north, and it's time we shared it finally with the people that live there in their own territories. We have several deposits that have been worked up and have significant opportunities, and they include Lynn Lake has a gold deposit, Snow Lake, obviously. It's multi-metallic deposit, but known as a gold camp. Cross Lake Pipestone deposit is a vanadium titanium deposit. Red Sucker has Monument Bay, which is a gold deposit. And of course, Hollow Water has silica sand, which is been mined for thousands of years. It's time for Indigenous peoples to be at the table in a partnership with respect and knowledge. And I think all of us in the sector, whether we're academic or settlers or Indigenous, have been calling for it. And I think under the Truth and Reconciliation and UNDRIP, the time has come. And to that end, I just want to put a plug in for my association. The Manitoba Prospectors and Developers Association has initiated a new initiative, and it's going to be talking about what's known as the land issue. It's large, it's complicated, but it's so important. It will be discussed in an open manner from all sides, from the Indigenous point of view, from the industry or prospector point of view, and from government. And that will happen on NCI on radio weekly. And I hope to have each and every one of you involved. I thank you for the time and welcome you to the wonderful world of minerals. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dave Lefeber. Dave has more than 30 years of experience with government geoscience surveys and mineral exploration companies. An economic geologist, he is knowledgeable about a wide variety of mineral, industrial mineral, and coal deposits. So Dave, thank you. And you can—
Thanks, Corian. I look forward to presenting this webinar today. Thanks, Marianne, for introducing us. I should acknowledge with this webinar that both Rick Symes and Christian Bohm, one a previous chief geologist with the Manitoba Geological Survey and one a current, have helped me with some of this material. I live on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. I have been to Manitoba. I have actually been and studied rocks in Manitoba a little bit, but it's I have had to do research and have help from a number of people, including some other people from Manitoba. I'm glad to be presenting to you from the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who speak the languages of Huquanum and Senecootan peoples, language-speaking peoples. So before I put on my headphones so I can make sure that you hear me clearly, I did want to tell you a story. Manitoba has a real history of mining, and it goes back to prospectors and early developments. But like the Sullivan Mine in British Columbia, I'm just going to show you, this is a wooden mine cart with some Sullivan ore on the top of it that I received when I went to the almost 100th year anniversary of the Sullivan Mine. It was found in 1909 in southeastern British Columbia. It mined lead, zinc, and silver, and the mine lasted until 2001. And it produced, I've run into quite a few miners and other people whose families lived in Kimberley or in the immediate area and worked at the Sullivan Mine for generations. Now, if I think of Manitoba, you also have that tradition of having families that have grown up in Flintlon and where there's been subsequent multiple generations. So that's not the only, there are other mines that don't last as long, but I thought it was a neat link. I was lucky as a geologist who had been underground at Sullivan Mine, probably about 20 times from before the mine closed, usually taking tours either from the mine geologists or taking students there. And it's just interesting that mining can have that impact on multiple generations from the same family. So I'll just put my headphones on here to make sure you can hear me all right. That work, Carmel?
Did you hear me? Yes, you're good. We can.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Share the screen. Let's go here. Okay, so I'm going to be here to talk to you about how mining represents opportunities for Indigenous communities in Manitoba. And I'm going to, so let's see. No, okay. So why explore for minerals? We need to realize that in our everyday lives, everybody in modern society and even ancient societies, we're very dependent on minerals in various ways. And so you can see the various products there. Some of them are very sort of more traditional products you might think of, like old style vehicles and fridges. We need coal to make steel. We need metals for various things. But we're also seeing new applications for minerals, and so that solar panels on the bottom right, I'll be talking about them. Silica sand is used for making the high quality glass that's required for solar panels. There's a lot more copper, believe it or not, in an electronic vehicle like a Tesla than there is in a traditional petroleum or gas powered vehicle. So, and one of the things we need to realize is that we're actually, as a modern society, increasingly dependent on minerals, not just for high-tech applications, but for the more traditional applications of creating roads and building houses. Actually, one of the things I like to mention is we tend not to think that the walls around me in this, they're actually wallboard, which is mostly composed of gypsum, which is a product that Manitoba has produced. So why talk about mining? I thought I'd give you, as this is an audience of economic development officers, I thought we should sort of give you the reasons for why you should be paying attention to mining in this presentation. There are 4 reasons: jobs and contracts. Mining is the #2 employer of Indigenous people in Canada. You have to think, well, who would be #1? Well, it is governments that are providing the #1 employer of Indigenous people in Canada. There are numerous agreements with Indigenous communities, and these can have potential related to mining, that is, and they can have potential for significant benefits. I'm not going to focus on that so much because I want to talk more about what an EDO would get more directly involved with, which is economic development opportunities, but I will give you a highlight on that. One of the advantages in Manitoba is that there are mines. If we talk about mines being sand and gravel pits and quarries, as well as, say, the large metal mines, there are mines that are spread widely across Manitoba. They can be in remote areas, rural areas, and even in some cases, suburban locations. I'm thinking particularly of sand and gravel pits in that location. And the other part why we're speaking about this, why we should talk about mining, is many people in Canada have not visited a mine or learned about them. And obviously that means it's a sector you're not less likely to know about, therefore you're less likely to think about it for opportunities. Indigenous employment in mines, it's in mining accounts for about 12% of the Indigenous people working in the mining sector account for about 12% of the Indigenous labor force. That compares with an all industry average of just 4%. And in a couple of the mines, it's about 14% of the workforce in the 777 and Lalor mines of Hud Bay in 2019. So we can see that the mines are doing a good job of employing Indigenous people in their local communities. One of the things we should remember is that for every mining job directly related to the mining sector, there's judged to be usually 2 to sometimes 2.5 jobs in the mining supply and service sector, people working for other companies that are not the mining company. So that's about 17,000 jobs related to mining as of 2018 in Manitoba. Mines offer many attractive jobs, and I'll show that to you. They're not just the traditional vision of an underground miner or somebody in a sand and gravel pit driving equipment. There are lots of other types of jobs. And of course, these jobs exist in different parts of Manitoba, which is particularly important in northern Manitoba. So a wide variety of jobs shown here in the picture. We think of mine and we think of the wide variety of jobs. You can see, well, there are mine working jobs, and there's a picture of some people working underground, could be up in Flintlon or Thompson. That's maybe our traditional feeling about what could be an underground job. But look, there's a variety of jobs that can be done, but there's a mill and a shop where you could maybe learn a trade or work as a janitor. There's a variety of jobs there. Offices, we don't think about that, but they require admin staff. They require geologists like myself. There's a camp if it's in a remote setting, and that offers lots of opportunities for jobs. And then if you're particularly in a remote setting, roads can be quite significant. There's explosives. That means there's one estimate is there's about 160 types of mining jobs. These are some career descriptions. I've taken them from Alberta, but they apply equally to other provinces. And again, you can see, yes, here's somebody working in the surface as a surface miners, but there's an environmental auditor. Oh, and there's a chief administrative officer. So there's a variety of roles you can play, and it's not just the traditional miner that we're thinking about when we talk about occupations. Goods and services contracts. Mines require a wide variety of goods, particularly the larger mines. You can see some of those there, like gravel. They also sometimes need signs and pickets, and that they may choose to not make those themselves, but go to an independent contractor. And so they often contract out not only supplies or goods, but they also contract out specific services. And this represents opportunities for Indigenous companies that have equipment of their own that can contract that out. Companies of various sizes will bid on these contracts. And so some of these contracts, like the signs, could actually be quite small, which can be a very good way to get started as an Indigenous company. Mines generally prefer to contract competent local companies because there's advantages in terms of connections and staying connected to that community, but they also recognize the value of using Indigenous companies. And I'll come back to that in the presentation, that there are mines that will be looking for Indigenous companies to do work. One of my first examples of an Indigenous community working with a mining company. So we have the Norway House Cree Nation working with Rockcliffe Metals Corporation. And just a quote from the chief saying, our experience has worked well, as a business partnership, our experience has worked well with our Norway House Cree Nation, providing camp support and multiple services over the past year. And it's just one example of how, in this case, an exploration company, not a company with a mine, this is a company trying to find a mine, have been working with an Indigenous community to find employment. And they have their Norway House as their own Play Green Development Corporation. You can see some of their staff. Here's some of the things they've done. They can supply rock materials, ready mix, contract diesel fuel, but they've also gone into sort of supporting the camp for the company. And the company's asked, well, can you do this? And they've said, well, why not? We'll find a way to support your operation and generate jobs and contract funds for our nation. We switch to Indigenous community active mining agreements. This is a map that the federal government puts out, and you can see across Canada, they're showing these various dots. This is showing on the left here what the various types of agreements, and these can vary from very significant impact and benefit agreements to just say a letter of intent, where the initial contact is happening between the First Nations and the particular mining or mineral exploration company. What you will see is that in a province like British Columbia, where I come from, there are quite a few of these agreements, and there's a lot more of a history of it. If we go to Manitoba, we see there are perhaps less than, again, we're seeing in Ontario, and that's partially the relative size of the provinces, but it's also, there's more potential in Manitoba right now to see more of these mining agreements between First Nations and mineral exploration and mining companies. A good example of one of the ones in Manitoba is an agreement between the Red Sucker Lake First Nation and Yamana Gold, quite a large gold company with a number of mines in South America. And look, Yamana actually bought into it. They spent $50 million and this is from a newspaper article, to acquire a property where the previous explorer had defined that there was 3 million ounces of gold on it, which is worth quite a bit. And so Yamana obviously saw that there was potential. You can see there's quite a large, still exploration camp, a very large exploration camp in the photograph. And on the right, you can sort of see, this is the information. If you click on that map, you see what the agreement, what type of the agreement is. In this case, it's an exploration agreement. You see when it was signed, where it was located, and who the parties were with it. So just, that's a very important, it can be very important for First Nations when there are agreements signed related to exploration or mining companies working their traditional territory. But in terms of an economic development officer, it's much more likely that the band council will be negotiating with the company, and it will not necessarily be the role of the economic development officer to bring the company to the table, although you might be asked to provide information if you're knowledgeable about mineral exploration and mining. Just a comment that many mineral exploration projects don't last more than 3 or 4 years, and I'll come back to that. It relates to success, but they can be continue to be active for decades as people try and find these elusive mineral deposits. Well, where are the areas that you find metal mines in Manitoba? And they're generally areas where the mineral potential has been demonstrated by mines past and present, or where exploration is undergoing. So we have copper, zinc, gold. You can think of Flintlon, the Snow Lake area, and that part of central western Manitoba. There's the nickel copper deposits. Think of Thompson. And then there's gold, and gold is actually probably more widespread than I'm showing, but you can see it along the eastern side of the province going into Ontario with similar rocks, so it can be found on both sides of the border, just the way the copper zinc extends it into Saskatchewan. And then you can see there's another area which overlaps with the copper and zinc. So those are areas where it's more likely to find the deposit, new mineral deposits based on what we know. It doesn't mean that there are other areas of the province don't have potential. It's just we know less about them. And we'll sort of come back to that to explain that theme. When we look, Manitoba is exciting for rare metal potential, and there's a list of them there. These are becoming increasingly important for modern society. They're used in laptops and phones, in a lot of electronics. And they become important to lithium batteries for electric vehicles, which require obviously using batteries, and they need to hold more and longer power. And these rare metals play a role in it. Manitoba has the Tanko Mine, and it's the only mine so far that's related to rare metals, and it opened in 1969, and you can see that's down in this area here. We'll come back to that. But you can see there are some areas that have been identified through the Geological Survey and Expiration as to where more rare metals could be found. And there's the Tanko Mine. Manitoba has quarries and aggregate pits. They're largely in the southern part of the province. I'll talk more about them later, but they also present economic development opportunities for First Nations communities. So mine products in Manitoba: nickel, copper, cobalt, like Thompson, copper, zinc, think Flintlon, gold, think this is the down in the southeast corner of the province near Bissett. Then we have move this out of the way here. Sorry, rare metals. Sorry, and just hold on a second. Just adjust this thing here. Sorry, sand and gravel, often ignored as an opportunity in Alberta. In the Alberta webinar, we talk about this in more detail, but there are certainly opportunities for First Nations communities and companies to get involved in developing a sand and gravel operation. And anywhere there's a road, there's a sand and gravel pit. Anywhere there's housing and construction, there's a sand and gravel pit. So that's going to be widespread in the province. Sorry. And then quarries, rock and stone quarries, limestone quarries for making cement. Mining, it's not that well known. Well, why is that? Well, it's not generally taught in the schools. I certainly didn't learn about it. In my family, there are no people who worked in mining or mineral exploration or geologists. So, and there still aren't. So it's often you may not even have a family member who has a relationship to it. Many mines are in remote and rural areas, so you don't see them. Access has to be restricted to the sites for safety. It's the safest industry and heavy industry in Canada, hence people don't get to see it. By the time you see a mining product, I'm looking around my office here, and everything I see, almost all those products, other than the plastics which are coming from oil and gas, and the wood that's coming from forestry, is produced from mining. But by the time I see it, I don't necessarily think of it as a mining product. And I think to a certain extent, the mining sector focuses on the job at hand and could perhaps do a bit better job of advertising what they're doing. So here's some highlights about Manitoba mining. There are 4 metal mines. There are numerous industrial mineral quarries, numerous sand and gravel pits. The annual value of mining production as of 2018 was $1.5 billion. Mineral exploration spent just over $67 million in 2018. And when you combine mine and petroleum complex development for Manitoba, you get over $600 million in trying to develop mines. And one of the interesting things is when a mine's being developed, you actually need more people, and you're often spending more money on services and contractors than once the mine gets up and running. And here you can see what's produced for mining commodities in 2021 in Manitoba. So we mentioned nickel, copper, zinc, gold, and silver. It's no longer tantalum at Tanko, it's cesium that's being produced. And then you can see the rocks that are produced from, and the silica sand that's produced from quarries. and the construction materials. So that gets us started. It gives us a bit of an idea of what the sector's like, and hopefully it's produced some questions. So over to Carmel and to the rest of you to see if we have, as we get going, it might have been a question you came to the webinar with rather than one that's been prompted by the slides that I showed you, but we want to have some interaction here if possible. It might even be a question about something that Marianne mentioned too.
Yeah, so we do have a question from Shannon Goulet. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, thank you, Carmel. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Shannon.
Wondering the hydro dams in your slides, the 2 slides with the Manitoba map, and you were going through certain minerals. One of them was rare, and the slide before that, I noticed that along one of the maps, there's actually a series of hydro dams in that area. So what impact does that have for any potential exploration? Or can they help each other somehow?
Well, there's a couple things there. Thanks. A good question, Shannon. And I will talk a little bit about access to land in the next part. So you'll get a bit more information that will provide help you out with that. In a general sense, if there's hydroelectric power being generated in an area, that's an advantage to a potential mine, because mines would prefer to use hydroelectricity over diesel fuel. It's usually cheaper, but it's also environmentally more friendly. So having proximity to a hydroelectric power line and potentially a dam could be a big advantage. Now, with the dam, you've created an area where you've obviously got ponded water and you've covered up a lot of land. There also will be some constraints as to where you could explore and then develop a mine related to those hydroelectric dams and their infrastructure. So that it's generally a positive, but anybody who's a prospector or an exploration company will need to study the regulations in Manitoba and establish where in that area they can actually explore and then potentially develop a mine. So the hydroelectric power is a huge advantage, not just to a mine, but to communities and other companies working in that area that have plant or infrastructure. But it does mean that there's some of that land is not going to be accessible to mineral exploration and mining. And it's not an area of expertise of mine, so it's probably as far as I could go with it. But you will see a couple of slides that sort of more address sort of what areas of land can be accessed for mineral exploration and ultimately mining a little later. But thank you, Shannon.
I don't know if I'd like to just jump in for a comment. In terms of exploration prospectors, the dams that have covered the land like South Indian, that's very difficult to do exploration in that area unless you use geophysics, which we often use. And it should be noted that Manitoba has always used extremely low hydro rates as an incentive for extractive companies. So Thompson and Flintlon, the producers, have had very advantageous hydroelectric rates, and that helps attract those companies to Manitoba. Thanks, Dave.
Oh yeah, thanks, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Marianne, for your questions and answers. I have another question from Tim Johnston. Tim, did you want to ask Dave your question? Or would you like me to read it out?
No, I can, I'll speak to it. Quickly, Dave, I appreciate your presentation, your comments. I just wanted to bring a couple of other things to people's attention. One of it is that I have the opportunity, I'm going to ask Shirley Nault to help me out as well from Hud Bay, but I have the opportunity to sit on the Mining Association of Canada Community of Interest panel as an economic development representative in a volunteer capacity. And one of the things that has taken place with serious discussion over the last couple of years was an introduction of a new protocol towards sustainable mining, which speaks to Indigenous and community engagement. And I would really encourage people to take a look at that protocol through MAC because I think it's really important. And I think both you and Marianne have spoken to the future, the potential. But let's be honest, in terms of the historic development of mining, certainly in my area in Thompson, Indigenous participation and recognition has been very slow to the game and really is just beginning to have an honest and truthful discussion, hopefully now. So I make that comment. And to Marianne, I have a couple questions. One of the things that we hear about the most in northern Manitoba is the challenge with permitting in terms of getting people out in the field for exploration, the delay in applications for new mines. We also hear constantly in terms of the challenge, that constant battle between environmental and mining. And Dave, you mentioned it. I don't think a lot of people understand that there can be a balance. And in fact, mining and many organizations have worked together to try and move forward. So Marianne, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what we need to do, especially in terms of lobbying for the mining industry and addressing those specific provincial challenges like permitting and some of those other things that are sort of have made us move from number 2 or number 1 to number 30 or whatever. So I turn it over. Thank you.
I just want to just be mindful of the time. So if we could just do maybe a quick answer now, and if we do have time at the end of the presentation, we will have enough time to discuss further. So Marianne, if you...
Okay, I'll try and be really quick. Hi, Tim. I believe that it's important for us to come to a new deal with the Indigenous people of Manitoba. The reason why you're not getting permits is that they are sitting on a desk, and Indigenous people are asking for a new approach. And until that happens, I don't know that the province is able to unilaterally issue a permit. If you do, you then breach the concept of FPIC. And every community has now adopted those principles of consent, ongoing and free prior informed consent, and basically the right to veto. So it is a new world out there, and we have to become aware of it and work towards that. So that's why we are going public with this, with the hope of getting everybody to start to lobby the government on making significant changes to the Mining Act and moving Manitoba forward, because clearly being 37th place does not attract new economic development. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Tim. I don't mention it in this presentation because we're really constrained with time to cover a big sector. In the Saskatchewan, I talk about the Mining Association of Canada's initiative, and it's a very positive one, and I would encourage people to look at their website or perhaps watch Saskatchewan. But I include a few slides that address the work they're doing to try and develop sustainable mining with strong community involvement. And that is a very important initiative. It's interesting to note, it's not only been adopted by the Mining Association, it's being used across Canada by a number of the companies, and it's starting to be seen more broadly as something that more companies can use in Canada. It's been adopted by 8 other countries as their approach to developing mines and engaging with their local Indigenous communities and other communities. So a very important point. So let's move on. As Carmel said, I tend to try and cover lots of material, and that's what we're off to. One of the things that relates to what the conversation we should talk about, and I'm not focusing on today because I'm talking about opportunities, and I just don't have enough time, but mining opportunities come with concerns. Mines, particularly the larger mines, are heavy or large industrial operations. And so there's going to be a balance there between the potential benefit to the community, to society, to Manitoba, and concerns from not just Indigenous communities, but local communities. And so we're not going to talk about that today. I've done day-long workshops where that becomes an element of the conversation, and we talk about all the complexities. We don't have the time for that today, but you as an economic development officer and a representative of your community should always be prepared to ask questions, tough questions, and get involved, not just looking at the opportunity, but understanding the sector and its how it relates to your community. So government has a big role in exploration and mining. Thanks to Confederation, The provincial and territorial governments have been awarded responsibility for almost all aspects related to mineral exploration and mining. So they administer mineral claims, they regulate exploration activities, they generate geological information that tracks exploration, they permit the mines, they enforce safety regulations, they assist with mine training, they require reclamation plans and what we call reclamation bonds for mines. So now in modern in jurisdictions in Canada, when you start to plan a mine, they're starting to talk about how you're going to reclaim it, how you're going to close it, and then before they actually start construction on the site of a mine development project, they have to start posting bonds of money which will go to a bank held, which can be accessed only by government until the mine's closed, to use to pay for reclamation of the site if the company is unable to do it. And that's a huge step forward in trying to protect, to get proper closure and reclamation of mines. Federal government, they administer mineral rights and reserves, I should have there, can participate in environmental assessments of mine proposals, help administer underground exploration, mining, processing related to uranium. At this point, the only province in Canada producing uranium is Saskatchewan, your neighbor, although you do have uranium potential in Manitoba, which I'm not going to talk about because it represents a less significant aspect of mining, at least at this point in Manitoba. The Manitoba Geological Survey provides a lot of information. They give you free advice, well worth looking at their site, getting information from them. As I said, and some of the materials I'm using here, quite a few of them actually are directly from the Manitoba Geological Survey. I've just modified them for the presentation. Access to land for mineral exploration and mining. What you do to start your mineral exploration is you stake or acquire a mining claim, and it is registered with the provincial government to get the ownership for metallic industrial minerals. In the south, which you can see on the, which is called surveyed territory on the bottom, in the southern part where most of the people live, you have the claim boundaries become the actual township lots. If it's in the north, you actually have to go on the ground and outline the area of your claim and then submit information to locate it. There's no land access for mineral exploration and mining in protected areas. They're free from logging, mining, or the development of oil, petroleum, natural gas, or hydroelectric power. So there you can see there might be a protected area somewhere which is for a proposed, and I don't know this, hydroelectric project in Manitoba, in which case you would not be able to acquire the land. Designated areas, national and provincial parks, wildlife management areas, etc. Those also will show up on the maps, and you cannot acquire mineral tenure for it. If we go to First Nations lands, it becomes more complicated, and in that there are four different types of lands that relate to First Nations, where the regulations are, in terms of claim staking, are different. Treaty entitlement lands, or TLEs, it's not generally available for mineral exploration. In terms of new claims, there may be some pre-existing claims that were staked before this regulation. So you have to see the regulations regarding pre-existing claims. Northern flood areas, so this is hydroelectric end, it's generally not permitted in these hold areas, and that's presumably probably not going to just be underwater. There's going to be an area associated with that. If there was going to be approval for mineral exploration, it would have to be granted by the appropriate First Nation band. Community interest zones, they can stake there, and but the exploration permits must be reviewed and approved by the affected First Nations. Resource management areas, and again, these relate to boards, and they can have requirements. This is just an overview. Obviously, you'd want to, if you're interested or involved with it, you would need to refer to perhaps the government to get some advice or read more detailed information. But it gives you some sense of some of the controls and access to land, and also it gives you again a sense of how First Nations can play a role in terms of approval of, in some cases even allowing staking, but in other cases approving any work that's going to be considered on their land. Lots of acts and regulations in all the jurisdictions across Canada. Just listing there, we don't have the time to talk about that today. Manitoba obviously could be more active and we could be seeing more money spent on exploration, more money is being spent on mine development projects. But there are the companies that have been mining up there on the left, Bale, Hudbay, and Cinema Mine, all have an interest in mining activities and an interest in the province, which has been sustained. There are some advanced projects listed there and a lot of exploration companies. These are all companies who are listening to what Marianne said, is thinking, oh, Manitoba is probably underexplored for various reasons, and we see potential. And I'll be showing you some projects that clearly have potential to find a new mine. So most of the rest of the presentation I'll do today is talking about the life cycle of mining, prospecting and early exploration, advanced mineral exploration, going into mine development, in this case, going underground, mining itself, here's a head frame, and then mine closure and reclamation. And so that's what I would call the mining, and other people, the mining life cycle. It's interesting, there are indigenous business opportunities all the way through it. And one of the things you might take away is that actually indigenous companies, I think, have an advantage of getting involved in some aspects of mine closure and reclamation because of where they're located and the nature of that work. So mineral exploration path, you want to be doing prospecting, you want to be doing geochemistry, collecting rocks, collecting soils, collecting silts in the stream like we're seeing here, which indicate that there are some metals around at much lower levels than you could mine, but it's telling you that there's anomalous or interesting copper in that area or gold. Geophysics, which essentially is the ability to look into the ground using specialized instruments and start understanding sometimes whether there might be an indication of a mineral deposit or maybe just understanding the geology there. And then drilling. And drilling would be advanced exploration, so you start drilling. And that's really how we find most mines now, because a lot of the surface has been well prospected. And so you need to drill into the earth to find out. I can't emphasize enough how difficult it is actually to find new mines. And I'll talk about this again later, giving you a bit of statistics. But you see these three kids here, they're looking for a hidden resource. They've hit a rock with their shovel. They don't know that yet. They'll have to dig it up to see what it is. But they've been digging because they're trying to find a jewel box. They're trying to find a dinosaur fossil or maybe an archaeological remain. And that's the kind of enthusiasm you need to have to find, because there's a very, particularly for metal mines, a very small chance that you're going to find an actual economic deposit. Prospectors have found many of the mines that have operated in the past in Canada. They still are finding mines. They're still important. They are allowed in Manitoba and most provinces, as long as they're just going out and walking around with the rock hammer, not doing any surface disturbance, they're allowed access to the land. And they're hoping to find a property they can sell to a company. They're often using their own money. They're not necessarily financed by somebody. Some companies will grub state prospectors. And this is for some indigenous prospectors from the Atman area in BC. But this is Bill Ferrer's canoe. He's from Manitoba. He's headed out there to do some prospecting. Who's doing the work? Most of the work, if you get beyond the prospectors, they're small companies. We call these junior companies. There are several to tens of full-time employees. They're quite small. They often have a single office, Toronto or Vancouver. Interestingly enough, for Saskatchewan, it's often the company is based in Vancouver. For Manitoba, it's maybe 50-50. Vancouver is the exploration capital for the world. It's got the most. It's got roughly 700 companies doing exploration, not just in BC, not just in Canada, but around the world. Their shares trade for cents to dollars if they're lucky. Most do not own a mine, so they do not have any source of income. So they're investing in trying to find something and being rewarded for finding something. And many exist for less than 5 to 10 years. And then sometimes they change their names and sort of reorient themselves, and sometimes they just disappear. You can see three of the ones, and I'll be mentioning about properties they have that are working in Alberta right now. No surprise if you haven't heard about them, because they are smaller. So how does exploration start? It's got to have an idea. Well, to me, it's a little bit like the process of going for moose hunting. Well, what are the rationales I'm going to use for moose hunting? Well, first thing I might think, what's a good environment? As a geologist, I talk about rocks, but if I'm hunting for moose, I talk about, it's going to be open areas and swamps and edges of lakes and clearings, and that's a good environment. I could ask somebody, have you seen a moose, or where have you been seeing moose? And that's sort of like I could explore near old mines. There's lots of explorations done where there were mines in the past. You can definitely find new mines there. I can just say, well, I'm just going to go out and drive around and then hike in the woods. I'll find one. And so those are all things that are the same. And so that's what we're talking about. But you have to remember, if I'm trying to find that big moose, and I think I know where it is, I'm probably not sharing that information with competing hunters. And so the mineral exploration industry, particularly at the front end, it can be a bit secretive. And that's obviously a challenge for communities to know what's going on. Companies are much more progressive and much more open about what they're doing in Canada now than when I started my career. But there is a reason why they're sometimes a bit more secretive. So collecting samples, I talked about that, but there's just some different pictures of people collecting soil, till, silt, or rock samples to analyze. Some places access is, you're using a helicopter to get around because there are no nearby roads and you're not using a canoe. Geophysical surveys, these start with being airborne first, and they'll do surveys. They're not as effective as being on the ground, as you see on the right, but both of those provide us with both geological and sometimes direct indications of a possible mineral deposit below the surface. Some of the early exploration jobs. So you can see, if you follow on the left, you can sort of see how I'm going through the life cycle of mining. Prospectors, line cutters, samplers, geophysical crew. You're going to need people to run the camp. Often, if it's a slightly larger camp, you need somebody who's just sort of a camp jack of all trades. Mentioned that drilling is key to many discoveries. Just you can see a number of drills, and in not so much in BC, but in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, there's a lot of drilling in the winter and a lot of drilling on more drilling on lakes than we tend to see in British Columbia so far. Geologists get to see this wonderful drill core. You can think of the core, if you took a straw and you stuck it into a layered birthday cake, and that straw was strong enough, it'll fill up with the cake and it'll show the layering in the cake. And so this geologist is mapping, describing the core and looking for obvious mineralization like visible gold or a band of sulfides that contains copper and zinc, but also trying to understand the geology. For every hole they find something exciting, they're going to drill a number of other holes that may be away from that interesting zone. A winter drill camp, just trying to show you sort of what the living conditions are and working conditions are like there. Another example of an Indigenous company. This is Team Drilling. It's a partnership started in 2008 between a team of drilling professionals and Athabasca Basin Development, which is an Indigenous-owned development corporation that has a variety of companies in its portfolio. Most of them are joint ventures where they have a 51% interest, and they're working with a non-Indigenous partner with expertise who has 49% interest. And they've put a focus on, obviously because of their Indigenous orientation, on hiring Indigenous, training Indigenous, and using Indigenous employees. Another smaller example, one of the things that I wasn't able to find in my research, not just for Manitoba, but for other ones, is examples of Indigenous entrepreneurs, individuals or very small companies that are doing it. This was provided to me by Tom Lewis, the current president of the Manitoba Prospectors and Developers Association, and a personal friend. And he, on the left, you can see Louis McCready, who was working on a geophysical survey for him. But they were both aware that there's the exploration company was trying to drill, and the drill company needs lots of these core boxes. So Louis built core boxes and sold them to the company as a sort of a smaller scale type of opportunity, economic development opportunity. Environmental studies will start with these properties when they start doing mineral exploration, particularly once you get to the advanced stage. What early exploration usually has with no drilling, has limited impact usually on the land base. But the reason for doing the environmental studies is to make sure there's no problem being developed by the exploration. That's usually not the case, but you're also getting baseline studies to be used if the project's going to go ahead towards more continued exploration, but then certainly into mine development. And that data becomes really critical. And that's something that's happening now, just as the industry's evolved in other ways and government regulations involved. That's something that's evolved to make sure that the environment is being considered earlier on. So if we want to talk about where you can find gold, this is a map for the Manitoba Geological Survey, and you can see the areas that have potential for gold, known potential for gold are highlighted in yellow. And this is just an example of a company exploring the Lynn Lake area for gold deposits. I've stuck this up more for your information about the company. You can see they have a project in Manitoba, but they have other projects, and that's not uncommon because the chance of success is relatively small on any one property. Not all, but quite a few mineral exploration companies will have 3 or 4 properties, and not necessarily just in Canada, not just necessarily in one province, but trying to spread the risk so that they might, if they don't find it in Manitoba, they might find a mine somewhere else. They're looking for something which would be a high-grade gold deposit, and they find, these are the reasons from their website why they think working in the Lynn Lake area is an attractive place to explore, and there's a community. And so infrastructure is important to them because that means there's a greater chance if they find something it can be developed. So just how they're doing it. Another example of interaction between the First Nations, in this case a gold mine company, and the government is a training partnership. And this is between the Marcel Colomb First Nation, Alamos Gold, with some funding from the provincial government. This is actually quite recent. Started in December, I believe, and or perhaps in early January, and training to generate the skilled people that are needed for mineral exploration and or mining. Oxford Gold Project. It's located in central Manitoba. It's sort of quite a distance from Thompson. You have to take a float or ski-equipped aircraft to get there, or use a winter road. They planned a 1.3 million drill program in early 2018. It was deferred due to some delays. And part of that was a request from the, excuse my pronunciation, Boni B Cree Nation to complete a comprehensive exploration agreement. So they're saying, we think it's a good idea, but let's have an agreement in place before you start doing the work. And so in these days, many companies will not want to proceed trying to do anything without having the local community, particularly First Nation, on side. And they did sign a long-term agreement about it. We've seen this slide before, but so Yamana buys the property, and what happens a little bit later, and that was in 2015. This is from the government website. 2018, Red Sucker Lake First Nation signed an exploration agreement with Yamana Gold. And Yamana Gold is quite a progressive company, but these agreements take time. They don't often, particularly if a community hasn't necessarily done one before, it can take a while for the community to decide if and how they would like to participate. Nickel, we can see the Lynn Lake belt, we can see the Thompson belt, which is the best known. We can see that in the Flintlon belt, there's some potential. There you can see some of the companies that are exploring. I will talk about Wolfton for sure, and we'll talk about Vail later. So this is Rice Island near Snow Lake. It's 5 kilometers from infrastructure, hut-based Snow Lake concentrator and associated mining infrastructure. There was mineralization found here by Inco in what they call the main zone. That's quite a while ago, but it was never deemed to be economic at that time. They've gone back. They think they found a new mineralized zone at depth. And let's see. Yeah. Remember that if you get negative drill results, often that can lead to sort of termination and expiration on the property because you can't necessarily attract more investment. Doesn't mean necessarily that there isn't potential to find something. It's just could mean that there's a deposit there, but you were perhaps looking in the wrong area. But for these junior companies in particular, they need to be able to use their results to raise investment. Wolfton is one of the beneficiaries, again, a very recent announcement of the Manitoba Mineral Development Fund exploration grants. And so the government is providing a certain portion of the costs for the diamond drilling near Snow Lake. The company will typically have to provide more of the cost for the drilling. And this is an attempt to attract investment to Manitoba. Other companies have had, other provinces have tried to attract companies to their jurisdiction by offering similar types of programs. It is a successor to sort of a previous, slightly different program. British Columbia has done this in the past when they were trying to attract more exploration investment. Here's another junior company, Corian Mining Limited. They're looking for nickel, copper, and there's cobalt in this, which is a particularly useful element in more high-tech applications as well. Lynn Lake was mined for 24 years. They think there's potential, and you can see in this case, here's Lynn Lake. They're exploring right around the community because the community was built around the original mine, and they're saying that there is potential here that may not, to find a deposit that was not, has not yet been addressed. Flintlon Mining District, this is sort of in a broader sense. We can see Flintlon here. We're talking about Kellenex, which is working over in this area here. And they're planning to drill 2 drill holes for 1,500 meters, have a bigger program planned for 2021. One might suspect that they applied for a grant as well. Diamonds. You wouldn't necessarily think about diamonds for Manitoba if you haven't been following that story across Canada. The first bedrock source of diamonds has been found by Adia Resources on their Lynx property. They found a total of 29 macro diamonds. So you can have micro diamonds that are hard to see, and macro diamonds that are larger and actually have more than just an industrial use. They could be used if of good enough quality and at that size in jewelry. Here you can see they've used a saw to cut a strip of rock out here to sample. There's the saw they used, and here the buckets are going to put in. They're going to put these samples in here. So it's from some of these samples, I believe that they found those diamonds. And here's some of the diamonds that came out. Up until they found this, there were some diamonds being found in the soils in Manitoba, but nobody had found it in bedrock. And it's let's see, yeah, it's an exciting discovery. There's a new diamond mine called the Victor, not far away in the Hudson Bay Lowlands in Ontario. So there's clearly some potential to find diamonds in the future in Manitoba, which obviously excites exploration geologists. Adia has an exploration agreement with the local First Nation. It involves ongoing payments to the community fund based on how much exploration spending that is on the links. It seeks to bring in local labor and services from the First Nation. It's committed to obtain community approval for all exploration programs by submitting plans ahead of time and hosting public forums. It's said that the BCN is entitled to have an environmental monitor. So very positive relationship, I would hope, assume between these two groups. And here's the agreement, the chief speaking about it. These companies often change, junior companies will change their name as they either shift focus or ramp up to get new investment. So this agreement talks about Altius. That's an older name for Adia Resources. They've changed their name. Industrial mineral localities. Well, these are found in, as I mentioned, in southern and sort of primarily southeastern BC. There's a whole host of them. I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly, but there is where you can find high calcium limestone used for lime and for cement. There's brick and stoneware clay. There's gypsum, which is mentioned in the wallboard. There's bentonite. There's silica sand in 3 locations, 2 of which have received interest in recent years, kaolin and high purity dolomite. So there's a variety of industrial minerals that are typically mined in quarries and I'd say not all the time, but usually be smaller sites than a larger metal mine. Here's the silica sand, very high purity in places within this formation. It's exceeding 99.5% silica, which is amazing for a sand, which usually has a variety of things in it. It has been used in the past to make glass. The high purity has many value-added applications. This is sort of some granular sand, and it is also used by the oil and gas industry who link fracking. There is some undeveloped industrial mineral potential in the southeastern part of the province. There are 9 potash mines just across the border in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is the #2 producer of potash worldwide. It's a dominant mineral product of that province. These are 2 deposits have been developed, have been recognized but not developed, and these are the excess are 2 occurrences. So we talked about exploration, both early and advanced. Well, in early, it's about 5 to 50 people. They're maybe spending $50,000 to millions of dollars on an annual basis. Often summer field programs and sometimes winter drilling, perhaps more winter drilling. This is a general slide in Manitoba than places like BC, where we have avalanche hazards and stuff like that. Opportunity to provide exploration services and derive community benefits, and generally limited environmental impacts at the beginning. If we go to an advanced project, more people in the field, not just junior companies, but larger companies as well, bigger expenditures, field programs for multiple years, and usually year round if it's a really advanced one, unless there's problems like avalanches in BC or something like that. Significant opportunities to provide exploration services and sign benefit agreements, and usually have, still compared to mines and mine development projects, relatively small, but they have more significant impacts than the smaller programs, or have potentially more significant impacts, is perhaps a better way to express it. So here's an example. I couldn't find one of these for Manitoba. There could easily be someone out there, but my research and time to people did not turn it up. This is Native Exploration Services. It's a gentleman from Quebec who built a company, started out doing things like line cutting and staking, and then got into mineral exploration, doing surveys, and even the use of explosives, doing some training. Has ended up being a major employer for this Cree Nation in northern Quebec. His name is Sam Boson. He's formed this Native Exploration Services, and he's won the Prospector Developers Association of Canada annual Skookum Jim Award for an Indigenous person who's been extremely successful in mineral exploration and mining sector. So that potential is there to just set up your own independent company and service, particularly the mineral. He's servicing mostly the mineral exploration side of the industry. So we've talked about mineral exploration. Let's talk about mine development. So we're talking about more environmental assessment. For sure, you're into doing this. If you're thinking about mine development, you need that background data and then the ongoing data. There's going to be bulk sampling. This is from Saskatchewan, where they're doing drilling for diamonds, and you can see all this large drill core sampling they've done to try and find diamonds there. They have a project that is in the mine development stage and hoping to become the first diamond mine in Saskatchewan. You're going to need more government permits. You need to do your own internal economic feasibility studies. Can we make money on this? Or are we just going to spend a lot of money but not be able to actually make money through the mining? And they have to raise funds. Somebody has to be prepared to invest in it. Factors determined is economical. You can read it there, but it's the type of mineral, the market price, location, access in terms of infrastructure, distance to markets, the regulatory regime, and the amount of taxes will be an important component. It needs to be environmentally safe and socially responsible mining these days in Canada. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble attracting investors to invest in your company because they know your company's putting that project at risk. And you need a qualified workforce. So here's a mine development project near Woboden in central Manitoba. Rockcliffe, we saw them before. They have a 7-year lease on the Bucko mill. They would change this from a nickel processing mill to copper because that's what they're exploring for. And they're continuing exploration on a couple properties in the vicinity that could use this infrastructure. The Bucko mine right now has been on care and maintenance mode because Can Nickel was no longer using it, and Rockcliffe is at early stages of is in the exploration stage. Here's a Silica Sand project in the mine development. It's the Wannabe Silica Sand project. It's located near the communities of Seymour, Hollow Water, First Nations, which Marianne mentioned, and on the east side of Manitogogan and on the east side of Lake Winnipeg. They have partnership agreements with 2 of those people. It's being developed by Canadian Premium Sands, and they estimate a mine life of about 25 years, an investment of $330 million, and creating about 150 jobs. They've got an approved environmental license for it, and they originally were expecting to start construction in 2020. They haven't actually done that. And remember, we mentioned that the Hallwater Chief Defense in the comments, he's defending the Silica Sand project. Well, what does that mean? On the other side, there's some people in the community who are concerned about how that project should go ahead. Stage 2, and junior companies can do this, they sort of see another opportunity and they pivot, and they're saying, we're going to focus on developing it as a source for glass rather than frac sands and other industrial uses. We formed a subsidiary company. They have low amounts of iron as well as being really pure, and they're very suitable for being used in glass for solar panels like here, or in very efficient glass on the exterior buildings, both of which, one of which keeps the amount of energy in the building higher, the other one which is conducive to generating electricity. So interesting. We'll switch to mining, and I've got to keep moving here. This is the statistic I wanted to talk to you. So we talk about metal mines. So it's a metal mine marathon. You started off with the Prospectors, a very early exploration. Perhaps you stake 1,000 properties in Manitoba, or companies and prospects, and there are a variety of people stake 1,000 metal properties. There are hundreds of mineral exploration properties as a result of it. You have to remember that for every claim staked, maybe 20%, if you're lucky, actually see significant exploration on them. Somebody saw the potential, but they couldn't attract investors for it. Then several mine development projects start out, but not all those mine development projects result in a producing mine. They may not get permitted. They may decide the commodity prices might drop, and they decide to sit on it. And so that's a very risky business to be in. So just need to keep that in mind when you think about the sector and what might be happening with it. So senior companies, these are the people who are usually developing the mines. They hundreds to tens of thousands of full-time employees, multiple offices. They'll have producing mines as a source of funds. Sometimes they have refining capacity, and their stocks trade for tens of dollars or more. Vail and Hudbay would be the 2 of the senior companies working in Manitoba. You've got Flintlon, Snow Lake, and Thompson Nickel Belt. Those are areas, world-class mineral belts, and where those 2 companies, in part, have founded their strength. I'm just going to show you some mines. 777 mine in Flintlon, underground copper, zinc, gold, silver mine, expected to close in 2022. The lower mine, Snow Lake, and this is a more recent mine of Hudbay, and they're hoping to transfer some of their staff. It's got some very rich, gold-rich ore, even though it's a zinc, gold, silver, copper mine. It's very particularly gold-rich, which makes it more attractive. Gold being worth somewhere in the order of $1,800 US per ounce. Hudbay Mine, some sort of stats. So what you see is and I found this out of their 2019 annual report, both Hudbay and Vail are getting better at reporting their relationships with communities. And they're talking about number of employees they had at the 2 mines. Then they talk about the percent of Indigenous and female employment, the percentage. And then they talk about benefits that are flowing either as sort of grants or project support for local communities or payments to Indigenous contractors. They're also involved with training along with the government. I should not, you would have seen the premier there in the picture, and that's the reason he's there, is the government supporting that. We go to Vail. Here's the Thompson Mine. Neat to see 2 head frames along the structure and some open, more historic workings of this very large mine. It opened in 1958. They're going to spend $23 million over the next 6 months to see if they can decide to extend the life of the mine, obviously important to the local community and to the company. They got 5 surface drill rigs, and the life of the mine depends on them finding more ore for it. I'm going to give you a geologist or a little diagram here. Hopefully you can. So there's the 2 head frames, okay? There's the underground workings showing the gray area, which is mined out, and areas that have potential in different colors. Well, they need to find more ore below that to justify continuing mining. It gets more expensive as you go deeper, and they need to know that if they're going to invest to develop the underground, that there's more ore there. So they're drilling. This $23 million is mostly going to go to drilling a number of very deep holes to see if there's more ore to keep this mine alive. I'm optimistic that if they do enough drilling and they have good exploration geologists working on it, they will find more, but we'll find out. I'm an exploration geologist, economic geologist by training, so I'm basically one of the more optimistic people that you'll meet. So let's go underground. Just for a change, I've been underground a number of times, and I saw some shots from Manitoba. That's what it looks like if you turn your light off and you walk underground as a mine geologist. If I'm walking around underground in a mine on my own, which I don't do a lot of, but if I do, it's going to look a bit more like this with my light off. And this is if you're working down there, it's a bit more like that. It's just a different environment. There are generations of people who worked underground in mines and who speak well of it. I prefer working on the surface, I must admit. So they have a smelter there. That's been a big deal. It closed, unfortunately, in 2018. So they now ship the nickel concentrate to Sudbury. They have local hiring procurement plans, local hiring and procurement plans. So they're going to hire local, and they're saying what their objectives are. They would not have done this 10 or 15 years ago and put it in a public document, perhaps, unless they were really advanced. And I'm not picking on these companies. I'm just showing you an example from Manitoba. They're also talking about local procurement. And you're seeing more and more companies saying they want to procure locally from Indigenous sources. Not only from Indigenous, but including Indigenous sources. Here's Mid-North Development. I don't know if they've done any mining construction. They don't talk about it on their website, but they have the capacity to deliver projects for mining companies and exploration companies. You know, they've got lots of equipment, and they have trained up quite a few people. So there's an opportunity for them. Have they addressed it? I can't tell you. We have the True North Gold Mine near Bissett, 1911 gold. We'll come back to the 1911 right at the end. Here you can see, here's the head frame. They're no longer producing, actually, in the short term from the underground here. They're actually doing something innovative, is they're mining from their tailings. So when you mine gold, you end up getting the pieces of gold out of the rock, but then you have very fine grained rock that went through your mill, which you broke up to get the small grains of gold, and it's put into these tailings and impoundment areas. Well, for older mills, even sometimes for more modern mills, you're not going to get all the gold. And so they're going back because of the high prices of gold, and they're mining here, they're excavating and mining these old tailings. They've taken off the sort of oxidized layer on the top, and they're processing that to recover gold. And they're getting, they sold their gold for $11.2 million, and they made $1.6 million off it, mining these tailings in 2019. Not a bad decision. Tanko Rare Metals Mine used to produce tantalum, now produces the cesium. It's used as a fluid primarily in oil and gas wells. Tantalum, as I've mentioned, is used extensively in electronics. There's a tailings impoundment area. Here's the main infrastructure for the mine, and it's a much larger, different than metal mines. A lot of these industrial mineral mines, if they go underground, rather than being a layer they're mining, it's a zone, and so they can have some larger underground workings. Here's the limestone Corian plant from Greymont, and just a shot of an open house. They're producing quite a bit of this crushed quicklime or dolomitic lime, and some of that is being used in cement. Quarries and aggregate pits, again, they're going to be in that southern part of Manitoba. Lots of these pits, lots of opportunities. In the Alberta mining webinar, I sell this as an opportunity in Alberta for First Nations to think as a way of getting into mining locally, because they're almost everywhere. The capital cost of starting a smaller aggregate pit is way smaller than it is for some of these other types of mines. So life cycle of mining, I do want to talk about the end, about mine closure and reclamation. This is important for two reasons. First reason is important that mines were not, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, there was not much thought about reclaiming mine sites and doing it in an environmentally appropriate way. And now we have lots of regulations. I mentioned the reclamation bonds, so that if a company goes defunct, then the government has the funds to do the reclamation. And so it's very important to completing the life cycle of the mine, but there's some interesting opportunities for Indigenous businesses in mine closure and reclamation, because you often you're living locally to the mine, particularly in remote areas. That's important. A lot of the monitoring that needs to be done on a mine site after it closes, which can go on depending on the type of mine for a couple of years, sometimes for considerably longer. They're going to want to use a contractor. If they can use a local contractor, that's going to cost them less. Also, they have some, if they hire an Indigenous local group to do it, or company, that company obviously has a vested interest in protecting the land. And so that's important in terms of having an effective operation, but also in terms of accountability. So Manitoba introduced mine closure regulations in 1999. They started an abandoned and orphaned mine site rehabilitation program in 2000. That was because of these older mine sites where the companies were not required and had not reclaimed their mines. There were safety considerations with them, but also environmental one. They picked 5 high priority sites, which are listed there. And First Nations have participated in some of these programs. They identified, and I'll talk about these ones, they identified other sites at that time. So there's just Lynn Lake, Sheridan, Snow Lake, God's Lake, Ruthan Mine Site. They remediated a tailing management area for Lynn Lake. They did tailings relocation neutralization work on Sheridan, commissioning of a water treatment plant there, relocation of some of the infrastructure, capping of tailings at Snow Lake, just a variety of things to clean up the sites. And that's definitely a step forward. Here's a couple of visuals. Here's the Reed Mine of Hud Bay, what it looked like in July 2018. It was closed, it would have been closed or closing at that time, and as the site has been reclaimed. Here's from the North and South mines of Valley. They completed this work over 6 years, reclaiming 2 mine sites, and this is a fairly dark image. This came from their annual report. Vail says, it's right in their one of their annual reports, opportunities arise as we retire certain assets. You can see they're reclaiming the slag pit. And so these are things they're advertising that we're looking for people to help with us to reclaim these sites. Company not based in Manitoba, but doing work in Manitoba and perhaps having offices in Manitoba, which would be certainly suitable for working in this type of industry and a model for people for Indigenous communities in Manitoba, is this quite large one based in Ontario. And you can see they're working across several provinces. They've got quite a bit of size. They didn't start that big. They were much smaller. They're 100% Aboriginal owned, which is or Indigenous owned. That's from their website. And they are ISO certified, which is also impressive. So learn your ABCs of mining, financial risk, increasing involvement by Indigenous, and new mines can support new infrastructure. With financial risk, mine exploration and mine development require investors. Investors are trying to pick the projects that are going to give them a reward, but have a lesser amount of risk. If commodity prices tumble, they're worried about there being more risk. If mines start producing and the commodity drops, they're worried about less revenue. Mining process is more costly. There are all these factors that come into financial risk. So this risk assessment is a key factor for how exploration and mining companies respond to developing and moving their projects forward. With respect to increasing Indigenous involvement, it can start with employment. That's usually, and it's historically, that's where it started. It can be involved in regional infrastructure. It can involve mineral exploration and mine permit approvals as you get more, as the jurisdiction and the First Nations become more sophisticated. Indigenous company contracts, mine benefit agreements, infrastructure agreements, and ultimately perhaps shared ownership. And that's all very positive. That's all a way of moving mining forward, both from all perspectives, potentially. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is that and I can be corrected on this, but northern Saskatchewan tends to have more continuous regional infrastructure than nearby Manitoba. And I interpret that to be that mines in part have provided both the incentive and some of the government income that has led provinces to build more northern roads. And not in Manitoba, not in Saskatchewan, but in British Columbia, we've had a number of power lines, a couple of power lines, which have been developed almost entirely due to mining opportunities. They could contribute this in Manitoba, I think. So if you want more information, go look at these brochures for the Manitoba Geological Survey. And they state Manitoba is home to large areas of high mineral potential, which remain underexplored when compared with similar regions elsewhere in Canada. Marianne stated that. Yeah, get time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there we go. I'm there. So we have sources. So we're into Q&A. And I can ask you guys a question. Why are so many numbers used for mine and company names in Manitoba? 777 Mine, 1911 Gold Company, the T3 shaft or head frame, the 378. And everywhere else in Canada, it's often some historic figure associated with the company or the community that gets the mine named out. Anyway, you don't have to answer that. It's over to you. We need a few questions before we close up here.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we do have one from Diana Ballantyne. Did you want to unmute yourself, Diana, or should I read it out?
You can read out the question. I'll just wait for the answer. Thank you.
Okay. So Diana's question is, in the many agreements with Indigenous nations regarding mines and minerals, have there been any revenues sharing given to First Nations as exploration does happen on reserve and on traditional territory? If not, when will the opportunity arise for such benefits?
Well, I guess, unfortunately, I don't know Manitoba well enough in the details there to sort of respond specifically for Manitoba. If I go broader and look across Western Canada and go to British Columbia, my home province, if we go back in time, I would say no. I'm not sure how far to go back in time, but if we go back certainly 25 years ago, that did not exist. There is a mine that started in about 2013 in British Columbia called the New Afton Mine, and they have a revenue sharing agreement with the two local First Nations there in the Kamloops area. That's still relatively unusual. Also in British Columbia, there are for First Nations that have a mine that's been developed on their traditional territories, there have been a number of agreements developed, and you might want to look at the British Columbia Mining webinar to see that little bit of information, where the government is sharing a portion of their tax revenue from that mine with that 1, 2, or 3 First Nations whose traditional territories that mine might sit on. Unfortunately, I don't have certainly not enough knowledge about Manitoba to answer that question in detail for there. It's a relatively new idea, so it's not happening very many places globally. I could say that, I think, fairly comfortably.
Okay. Did we have any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay. Dave, did you have any last comments you wanted to make before we ended?
Last chance. Well, I think I mentioned I'm an exploration geologist and I'm optimistic. I think part of the interesting thing about Manitoba is it is underexplored for various reasons, and some of that's access. In British Columbia, we've had, I think, more logging pushing into different parts of the province, and that's given more road access. So it costs you less to explore, you get more prospectors there. It provides, you know that upgrading it to access for a mine is probably going to be easier. Manitoba, and I can't claim to understand all your infrastructure well, but you have large areas where it's remote and it doesn't have that kind of access. So the land in Manitoba has not been prospected to the same extent. Actually, it's probably a better area for prospectors than some other parts of the country. And you can, in looking at the information that the Geological Survey, this Manitoba Geological Survey provides, you can see there's a lot of both obvious potential with looking for more deposits like were found in Flintlon or Thompson, but also looking for diamonds. You know, who thought Manitoba and diamonds? When I first started studying as a geologist, we had no, we knew there was geological potential in the Canadian Shield to find diamonds, but there were no reports of diamonds anywhere in Canada that I was aware of as a student at that time. Now we've had 7 diamond mines. There are 5 still operating, including the Victor Mine just next door in Ontario, and the mines in the Northwest Territories to the north. And so if we combine that with critical minerals and rare metals, there's really exciting exploration potential in Manitoba. But people need to be aware of it, and they also need to be reducing their risk to come there. You know, I have to think about how to express it. They want the least amount of risk possible when they go there, because they have so many more. My analogy to this is if a person is going to go out and walk in a tightrope tomorrow morning, they don't want to fight with their family. They want to make sure, look at the weather report to make sure it's not going to be a windy day. They want to go out and test the wire they're going to be, or rope they're going to be walking on, to make sure that that's safe and secure. Well, mineral exploration and mining companies have to make all those judgments when they decide where to put this 1 in 10,000 chance for a metal mine investment into it. Now, if you get to the stage of advanced exploration, then there's less risk, but you're still trying to say, well, I don't want that windy day. Yeah, let's not have a fight with the local community. You know, that's going to slow things down. Could mean it's not going to be developed. And so you have to realize that risk element is an important part to attracting people to jurisdiction. And government is part of that. I did mention that. Government is part of creating an environment that makes it an attractive place for people to come. That would be my last throwaway comment.
And just on time, how perfect. All right, so on behalf of Cando, I'd like to thank our guest speakers, the Honorable Marianne Mahaitek for attending. She did have to leave early. Natural Resource Canada for funding our project, and of course, Dave Lefeber for sharing all of his experience and knowledge. This session is being recorded and will be available afterwards. And there will be a survey link for your chance to win $400 at the end of the week. So tomorrow will be the draw. All right, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Paul, could you stay on, please? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll stay, Dave.
Thanks.